Tēnā koutou katoa. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to have this kōrero with you. I felt I'd said most of what I wanted to say in my written submission, and I'll just summarise a couple of what I think are the main points from that, and then I'd like to invite questions, because I see the only way out of the situation is through good faith dialogue. I think we need to focus more on process, and I think a lot of that to date has been negatively impacted by sort of assumptions of bad faith. And I think there's also a lot of ideology embedded in this. I follow US politics fairly closely, and you can see a lot of great similarities, despite the massive differences in the issues that we face here. And one of the really unfortunate things that I think has happened is the way that opponents of the bill have resorted to ad hominem and intimidation. I mean, calling people racists because they disagree with these fundamental aspects of New Zealand democracy is just completely counterproductive, and is actually one of the main reasons why I think we do need some form of process. But we need to align the many problems that face all New Zealanders, including Māori, with real solutions. And we can't just rely on slogans, name calling, and just sort of make this a naked contest for power. I've said in my submission that I don't think a referendum is the way to go, some form of plebiscite. I mean, the US just elected Donald Trump, and I doubt that many of us on this webinar actually agree that that's a good outcome for certainly the rest of us who aren't many of us who aren't in the States. I'd just like to read a couple of quotes from David Lange's Bruce Jesson lecture, which have influenced my thinking, and this isn't the only document I've looked at. But David Lange, obviously not a paragon of the far right. So I'm just going to read two short quotes. First one is, democratic government can accommodate Māori political aspiration in many ways. It can allocate resources in ways which reflect the particular interests of Māori people. It can delegate authority and allow the exercise of degrees of Māori autonomy. What it cannot do is acknowledge the existence of a separate sovereignty. As soon as it does that, it isn't a democracy. We can have a democratic form of government, or we can have indigenous sovereignty. They can't coexist, and we can't have them both. And the second one is, here I come to the dangers posed by the increasing entrenchment of the treaty and statute. The treaty itself contains no principles which can usefully guide government or courts. It is a bald agreement anchored in its time and place, and the public interest in it is the same as the public interest in enforcing any properly made agreement. To go further than that is to acknowledge the existence of undemocratic forms of rights, entitlements, or sovereignty. Now, that doesn't mean we don't need to have a dialogue. That doesn't mean that the treaty article should not be honoured. That doesn't mean that that wrong shouldn't be made right. But it does mean that we need to proceed very carefully, because the way this has been handled in New Zealand so far has really generated a lot of negative publicity about our country, and that's bad for everyone. And I'll shut up.
Thank you, Kendall. The time is yours to use UC Flips. You don't need to shut up, but we appreciate you providing your submission. We've got questions. The first one is going to be from Todd Stevenson, then we'll go Steve Abel and Tracy McClellan.
Thank you, and thank you for your submission. Just turning to the bill itself, in clause 6 obviously outlines the draft principles that are contained in the bill. Do you have any comment on those principles as they stand?
I think that I don't want to go into the details of what's actually in the bill per se. I'm more concerned because I don't think this bill is going to proceed. But what I want to use this opportunity for is to encourage people to engage in good faith. We need to sort of move back from the brink on this. So we need a better way of approaching the problems, because I don't think we can continue down the path that we've been on with the way that the principles have just been not legislated, but developed through a judicial process.
Thank you, Kendall. Go to Steve and then Tracy.
Kia ora, thank you, Kendall. I actually attended that David Lange speech in 2000. It was very disappointing at the time, I can say. The thing I wanted to say was, you recognise that in the process of colonisation, that the atrocities committed, the loss of land, the attempts at assimilation and denial of Māori rights and denial of sovereignty are all part of a long history and tradition of colonisation, which is founded in a principle of white supremacy, really. So those kind of tropes of colonisation are inherently racist. And so when we encounter modern day expressions of those tropes, the desire to assimilate, to deny Māori their self-determination or their sovereignty, is it not reasonable and correct that we should point out what underpins a desire to do that to an Indigenous group of people, that it is founded in ideas of white supremacy or racism?
No, I don't agree with that. I mean, are you suggesting that David Lange was a racist?
No, I'm not, but I'm suggesting that there's a difference between the individual being a racist, and it's not very useful to focus on that, and understanding that the structural concepts that underpin certain things that are being done are coming from a place of racism as a kind of a framework for seeing the world.
I don't see how that is a helpful framework for solving the problems we have in New Zealand at the moment. If you just want to focus on grievance, I appreciate that wrongs were done to Māori. I fully acknowledge that.
I'm trying to clarify whether you acknowledge that those wrongs were done from a place of racism. Do you acknowledge that there was racism in the colonial actions, if not today, in the past?
I think all sorts of things were going on, some of which were racism, some of which are probably just stupidity or greed. But I don't know how that helps us now. Enforcing everything through this lens, I think, is counterproductive.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's move to the next question. We've got a question from Tracy, and then we can finish with Takata.
Thank you, and thank you, Kendall. You may have already answered this in your response to Todd Stevenson's question, but you did mention a couple of times during your submission about the need to find solutions to real problems that we're facing. So what problem do you think, in your eyes, what problem is this bill attempting to address? And if you can articulate that, how do you think the process, which is another concept that you've highlighted as being important, how do you think that this particular process is done as a means by which to effectively address that problem?
Oh, there's a lot in there. I think that this bill was an attempt to address the ongoing issue of open-ended interpretation of Te Tiriti. And as I said, I don't agree with the black and white version of what the law is proposing. I do have sympathies for what the bill was trying to achieve. So my question is, if we don't do something along these lines, what's the solution? I just an endless sort of, at what point would we get to a stage where, as I said in my submission, where all New Zealanders have equal democratic rights and are equal before the law? I'm saying I don't think we're at that point now, but we need a mechanism to get there. I don't think this is the perfect mechanism, but I think it's pointing at some of the problems that some of the other submitters have mentioned, particularly in terms of the way that Geoffrey Palmer framed this originally, which I thought were inherently problematic. But it's not the matter.
Sorry to interrupt. That's the time we have for the session today. So I just want to acknowledge your.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So he doesn't know the history. I'll give him that. He's saying that ideology is muddying the waters. I'll give him that. Yeah, it is. That's why we have a tribunal. And I'm going to say it now that this bill or the referendum are not going to solve the problems of inequities in this country. It will do nothing to address the inequities. We need good policy to address inequity, and that involves working with independent bodies like the tribunal. And also, again, what is with this argument? Oh, we can't have coexisting sovereignties. Yes, we can. Hello, have you seen the European Union? And what's this definition of good faith? The tribunal is an independent good faith body. Like, he can't just make up any old crap like, oh, hey, let me just say to the tribunal, hey, Te Tiriti allows me to, I don't know, own all the ice cream in New Zealand because I'm Māori. No, they're not going to agree with that. It's like, come on.
Yeah, there's so much in that, and I mean, I think Steve Abel really kind of unpacked them quite significantly, but then I think also Tracy McClelland dealt with them really significantly by just saying, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and how does your submission go anyway to solving the problem that we've got here. So I think Tracy's question to him was actually really quite effective. But I also think it's quite interesting when you see someone who is clearly quite sympathetic towards the bill getting always the first question comes from Todd Stevenson, which I think is quite amusing.
What I find really strange.
Yeah, it's always a bit unusual. But I think.
Sorry, Nick. I just had a thought that appeared in my brain. What I find really strange, Nick, is that all of these people that appear to be in support of the bill don't come out and say, I support the bill. They're very vague about where they sit. And it's like, what side are you on?
Yeah, just own it. I mean, if you want to support, just say, I support the bill, just own it. The thing that I found quite unusual was that there's all this argument around around Te Tiriti and as our founding document, and it's kind of sitting in one corner. And then we've got this argument around you can't have separate sovereignty, and I think actually we can have Te Tiriti as our founding document, and we can also have a discussion around separate sovereignty. We're clearly beginning to have that discussion at the moment. It's an evolving conversation. We're clearly at the beginning of that conversation. But I don't think those two things need to be a black or white, yes or no. It could be an and or an and or some type of evolving discussion where we get to an agreed position over time. But I don't think we're ready to just go yes or no. And I think that's been one of the most interesting things around this, the whole process, really.
Okay, so Sam is telling me, sorry, Nick. Sam is telling me we got to do the countdown. So
We've got to do the countdown.
we got to do the countdown, guys. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll be.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok. Who's got the order, paper podcast? YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok. Who's got the order, paper podcast?